Do you ever feel like there just aren't enough hours in the day? You have all these goals and ambitions, but progress is slow and you never finish what you had planned on a given day or week. Well, you're not alone. So many people are grinding and stressed and feel like a failure because they simply can't get everything done. Today, we're talking about all things time management and productivity. By the end of this episode, you're going to have actionable steps you can take to do more and stress less. You're listening to the Online Course Show, where we dive deep into the strategies and insights that help online course creators build profitable, fulfilling businesses. I'm Jacques Hopkins, and after 11 years of running my own course business teaching piano, I'm here to help you do the same. Get ready because today's episode might just give you the clarity you've been searching for to bring your own online course to the next level. Today's guest is Alexis Haselberger. Alexis started her course business after a chance LinkedIn message from someone at Udemy, and that one message completely changed the course of her career. Today, Alexis runs a multiple six-figure course and coaching business and is a top name in the time management and productivity space. In this conversation, you'll hear her best tips on doing more while stressing less, as well as her amazing online course journey. Let's get into it. Hi, Alexis. Welcome to the Online Course Show.
Hi, Jacques. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. So tell me about your first course. What was the first course you put together?
The first course I put together was a course called Time Management Mastery, Do More, Stress Less. And this was a course that I did on Udemy. And it was a course that I made before I had ever taken an online course before. So I had literally no idea what I was doing.
That's interesting. I'm trying to think if I had taken any online courses when I made my first course. I don't think I've thought of that. So tell me how you got the idea for a course, even though you had never taken a course.
So actually, this is those opportunities that just show up on your doorstep sometimes. So I was pretty early in my business. And somebody from Udemy reached out to me on LinkedIn, and she was like, hey, we don't have a good time management course for our Udemy for Business product. Is that something that you would be open to creating or trying? Or, is that anything you're interested in? And at the time, again, I'd never taken an online course. Online courses were not really on my business roadmap. It wasn't something I had really been thinking about considering. But when you're early, you say yes, right? You're like, yeah, why not? Of course, we'll figure that out. And so I said yes. And it turned out that happenstance kind of meeting or that person reaching out changed the course of my business forever.
Wow. That's really interesting that Udemy had people just cold reaching out to experts.
Yeah,
so
right.
now we got to go back to because it's not pure luck, right? You obviously did things to put yourself in that position. So tell us more about what you were doing and maybe what appealed to that Udemy person on your LinkedIn profile.
So I think that one, I was doing time management, productivity, stress reduction, and I think I was doing it, and I still am doing it in a very different way to a lot of people out there. I think there's a lot of people out there in this space that are like, I call they're like the hustle culture bros, right? They're the, productivity bros. They're the wake up at 5 a.m., knock everything out before everybody else wakes up, track every moment of every day. There's that type of energy. And that is not my type of energy. I mean, my type of energy is you have a certain amount of time. You want to use that in a way that feels good to you. That's not happening right now. Let's figure out how to make it happen, right? I really focus on self-compassion and slow progress, not on, hey, we're just going to just do exactly like this one guy said, and then that's going to change your life, right? So I really focus on individuals. And I don't know, I guess I had, it was pretty early in my business. So I obviously had changed my LinkedIn to say what I was doing. And I knew that testimonials were going to be important early. So I gathered those, and I had been writing a blog since it's the very first thing that I did when I started this business is I said, I'm going to write one blog post a week. And I've never missed a week in the many years that I've had my business. So I think I was putting out content that resonated.
What was the goal for your business? Since online courses weren't on your radar, was it just a coaching business? Was it a personal brand? Did you want to get a lot of speaking gigs? What were you going after?
So my original goal was to never work for anybody else again. Like that was actually the goal. It was kind of a selfish goal.
Respect. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I had worked in startups, early stage startups for most of my working career. So 15 plus years at that point. And I had a lovely boss, CEO for a couple of startups that I'd worked at. He brought me along from one place to another. So I'd worked with this guy for 10 years. And the last startup that we were doing went out of business, like many startups do, right? And I had gained so much autonomy and trust during that kind of relationship with that CEO that I just thought, I can't go back. I can't go restart. The idea of going to get another job and like earn that trust again and prove myself, like I just didn't want to do it. And I said, you know what? I'll start a business instead. That'll be easier,
Clearly. Yeah. So what are the first things you did? I mean, a lot of people are like, all right, well, I need a brand name. Like, did you start there?
Well, embarrassingly, my business is still to this day called Alexis Haselberger Coaching and Consulting because I was like, if I ever need a DBA, I'll do that. But I was like, I'll just do something simple. My name is unique enough that like alexishaselberger.com was not taken, so I could have that as a domain. But there were two things that I did first. So the first thing that I did was get a website. I was like, got to go on Squarespace. I need a domain. I need a website. Because in my mind, I'm like, I need to have some place to point people. Like if I say I have a business, I need to have some place to point people to that business and to share what I'm doing and what it is, right? And then the second thing I did was I didn't know exactly. I knew it was going to be around time management, productivity. I knew I wanted to help people. I knew I wanted to help people who were successful, but really kind of had gotten there by brute force, So I kind of had this idea of who I wanted to work with. Similar to people that I had helped in this realm in my, when I was in corporate and startup world. And then I just started thinking, okay, what can I teach? Like, what can I share? What can I teach? And so I spent a few months just writing what I call best practices documents. I was literally like, okay, what are things that I know about that I think I do differently or have learned differently and that are really helpful in both the personal world and in the work world. And so I started writing these documents. And then eventually I had so many of them, I like literally printed them out, put them all on the floor and was like, can I group these together? Right? Like, are there groupings of these things? And that's how my first curriculum was born for my first coaching client. And so my first coaching client found me on LinkedIn again, like out of the blue, found me on LinkedIn, decided to give me a shot. And I built out the program week by week as I was doing it with him, right? So I was just like 1 week ahead every week. And that's how I built that. And then so much of my, a lot of things have changed, but so much of the process and the curriculum and the program, the arc that I use with people is still very much that, right? I mean, of course, things have changed, times have changed, got to talk about AI now and things like that. But like that basis is still there.
Tell me about that when that first person reached out to you about coaching. Like, did you freak out? Like, did you have any idea what to charge them?
No, I had no idea, right? I had no idea. And I was just making it up kind of on the fly. Like I'd done a little bit of work to kind of think, oh, what are other coaches charging? What could I charge, et cetera. But I quoted a random price and hoped it would be okay. And it turns out that it was. This person who was my first coaching client actually ended up being such a good champion for me over time. He was he was an exec at Google. The entire time he worked at Google, I had an endless set of coaching clients coming from Google because he was like, Alexis helped me so much. She can help you too. And then I would help his directors. And then they would be like, can we do it for our team too? And so there was a lot of that. He moved to another company. And then all of a sudden I just had an influx of people coming from that company. So he was really instrumental to my success as well.
Wow.
I mean, obviously, if I didn't do the work, it wouldn't have, if I hadn't have helped him, it wouldn't have caused that. But that was a really, when we think about things as like luck or work, I think a lot of it is luck. That guy found me. What we were doing together really resonated with him, and it helped me build out my practice in the beginning.
That's amazing. I remember the first time somebody ever reached out to me for one-on-one coaching, and I freaked out, and I had no idea what to charge. The first person to ever reach out to me for coaching was Nate Dotson. And like your story, he's been a champion for my material. This was 7 years ago, and he ended up being on the first 19 episodes of this very podcast. But he reached out to me if I did coaching, and at the time I didn't. But I was like, "Yeah, I do coaching." You know what?
Right.
You know what I charged him?
What?
I said what I told him was that my normal rate is $80 an hour, but I'll coach you for half, for $40 an hour.
Wow.
So I had no idea what I was doing, Alexis. No
Yeah.
idea. And I
Yeah.
didn't know, like, I probably should have put together like a package or something. I was just like, book one session with me, right? So how did
Mhm.
you do it? It sounds like it wasn't just one session. Did you just kind of put a coaching package together?
I did. So I put a coaching package together that was based on these kind of 8 modules that I had figured out. Again, I hadn't had and of course, you look back on what you did back then and it's just like embarrassing, right? It's like I had no materials. I had I was building out a Google Doc that was essentially an agenda that I would then share in advance, and then we would basically talk through it. Of course, it's much different now. Of course, now even my coaching has an online course underpinning under everything. Um, but yeah, I didn't know what I was doing. I had done a trade very early in my business where I gave a productivity talk for an organization, a small organization, and in exchange, they had a sales coach that worked with them, and she gave me a couple of sessions. So she had put in my head, "Oh, you should have a package." Like there was a little bit there, but I just kind of pulled it out. I was just like, "Okay, this is the package." And just like you, it's like you just say yes and you act as if this is totally normal, right? And you hope for the best.
Absolutely. I mean, they say fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious how some of the things that happened previously that made you passionate about this topic, and you mentioned that you kind of teach this in a different way than the mainstream. So to set this up, I want to tell a couple of stories. When I first started working as a full-time engineer, 2008, I got my first paycheck, and it was more money than I'd ever gotten at one time. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what do I even do with this money?" Like, I feel like a certain percentage should go somewhere at a certain like, I don't know what to do with this. And so I did a little bit of research, and I came across Dave Ramsey for the first time, and I just started following his system, and it made a lot of sense. Similarly, when I was working, I'm like, there's tasks, there's projects, like, how do I keep all this stuff organized? How do I manage my time? I started doing research, and that's when I came across David Allen, and I
Mhm.
started following his stuff. He's the author of Getting Things Done. I know you're probably very familiar with David Allen. Many people listening maybe or maybe not, but I think he's probably one of the top gurus in the space. So that's the basically the system that I use today is like the David Allen Getting Things Done approach. How did you develop your frameworks and start to be good at this?
Yeah. So I think that it may be different than you. I have never had success with doing something that somebody else, like taking somebody else's system and then implementing it just as they did. Like that, it never worked for me. And I was diagnosed pretty late with ADHD. And in retrospect, I'm like, that's why it didn't work for me. Right. Like there's a lot of things that work for neurotypical people that work for, I mean, quite frankly, that work for like white men that have a stay-at-home wife a lot that didn't work for me in a lot of circumstances. And so I had to do an incredible amount of trial and error from the time that I was, a kid, from the time that I was in high school. Again, I did not know that I had ADHD at the time. I actually didn't know that till I was like 40. But um but I had to do a lot of figuring out and experimentation of what kind of things I could pull from other people. But I realized I didn't have to do it wholesale, right? Like I didn't have to, like I read Getting Things Done 25 years ago and I tried it. And some pieces of it I are central to how I do things today. And other pieces of it didn't make any sense for my brain. Like it just didn't work at all. Right. And so I started to take that approach, and I'm a big researcher. Like I like you, I was like, okay, how can I have this problem? What can I do about it? And I'm a big researcher. I'm a big experimenter. And so I had started amassing all of these different techniques, tools, strategies that helped me. And then at a certain point in time, like I've always been someone who I care a lot about the ROI on my own time, like even when I was in high school, I was always making deals with teachers about how I could like not go to class but still get A's. I always wanted a 4.0 GPA, but like I didn't want to go to class. And so I was constantly making deals with teachers about like, oh, well, like I don't like being in this band. I'm really bad at practicing, but How about I just write a couple of papers about music and then we call it a day? It's good for everybody, right? Like I'm not in your band messing things up because I didn't practice and like I'm still getting an A. Or, I'm making deals with teachers of, I remember in my French class with like French geography, I was like, if I get an A on the test, I don't have to come to class until the next class, like until the next time we do a test. And he was like, I guess, okay, let's try it. So people were like willing to let me experiment with things in a way that maybe was lucky. I don't know. So I'd always been thinking about that. And then people started coming to me for time management and productivity stuff. And I started seeing that the things that worked for me didn't always work for other people, just as things that had worked for other people didn't always work for me. And so I started developing a way of trying to say, okay, like, let's learn about you exactly as you are so that you can then find the strategies that are likely to work with you in your brain in the long term. That was a long-winded answer to your question.
Go as long as you want, Alexis. This is great. So from David Allen, I would say I don't implement everything he recommended. I would say the key things that stand out that I took away from that book and still use to this day would be, first of all, just like writing things down. Like your brain is not good at it's good at coming up with ideas, but it's not good at like remembering those ideas and categorizing them and things like that. So like everything that your brain comes up with, like write it down. And so I'm pretty good at that. Like I took that so much to heart that I don't know if I've ever told you this before, but one of the business ideas that I got after reading 4 Hour Workweek before I created Piano in 21 Days was an app. Did I tell you about this?
No, I haven't heard about this.
Yeah. So I made an app because I was like, I write things down when I can. I even bought one of these little wallet notepads, like mini notepads, so I could pull out my wallet. It had a notepad built in, so I could write things down anytime. Yeah. I was like, the one place I can't write things down, I mean, this is like 2008, 2009, is when I'm driving. So like the tools with phones and stuff, Siri, that didn't exist yet. So I made an app. It was called Driving Thoughts. And you open it up and it would record your voice and then transcribe what you said and email it to you. It worked great.
You were ahead of your time.
Yeah. You ready for the tagline? This is my favorite part.
Give it to me. Yeah.
It's for when the wheels are turning.
Oh, actually, I love a juicy tagline. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I love it.
So I put it in the App Store. I never made any updates to it. Shortly after that, like Siri was invented. And so you could just say, hey, Siri, remind me to do this or email this to me. So it never made any money or anything. I don't think it's in the App Store anymore because it was made I only did it for Android and it was like a very old version of Android. But my point is that that was really important to me. Secondly, the weekly review, just like on a weekly basis, let's review our tasks, our projects, the things we're waiting for other people. And the third thing is the concept of inbox zero, right? Mm-hmm. So those three things I would say are probably my biggest takeaways. Are those, do you believe in those three things?
Yes, with the exception of I do a really tweaked version of a weekly. I don't do a weekly review. I spend a lot more time in forward-thinking planning than the weekly review. I found that the weekly review just like it took too long. And I kind of build in those practices on an as in the moment basis, right? So I'm like, my task list, my task system is always open 100% of the time, as is my calendar, always 100% of the time. And I am kind of updating things as I go. And then I do sit down for about 30 minutes at the end of the week and I really flesh out the next week. I look at my calendar, I look at my task list, I make sure that I'm planning for the time that I actually have, not the time that I wish I had. And I'm kind of an inbox zero person every day also. So I don't need to like backlog that towards the end of the week. I find that like the weekly review it just took too long. I just wasn't, I just couldn't do it. And that's true of a lot of my clients as well. I wonder if that's just like my ADHD brain going like, I can't go backwards. I can only go forwards. But inbox zero, definitely. I also write everything down. And I think long before David Allen, I was writing everything down because I have a terrible memory. Like I have a terrible working memory. And so even, I remember in high school and college, I didn't have any really systems, but I would write the things that I really needed to remember with a ballpoint pen on the back of my left hand. And so it would be like taxes and like history paper and whatever. And then I would just like try not to wash the back of my hand when I was taking a shower. Like that was my task list. I would be like, I can't erase this. And like sometimes it would get too long and it would start like going up my wrist it was ridiculous. So writing it down has always been totally important to me because I can't function without it. And we have so many good ideas, right? I mean, maybe on another day, I'll tell you about the app that I had in the App Store at one time that is no longer there as well. But I think like, you have ideas all the time. You don't want to lose track of those ideas. And so writing them down, because just as David Allen says, your mind is for having ideas, not for holding ideas, is the way to actually focus on the things at hand. Because if we don't do that, right, things are ping-ponging in your brain back and forth, and you're remembering things at the wrong time. And there's always this bit of anxiety in the back of your brain that's like, I know I'm forgetting something. I just don't know what it is or when it's going to come back to bite me.
Did you have an idea for an app or did you actually make it?
Oh, I made it.
Oh gosh, I have to know. What was the app?
It was called I'm Bored Roulette. And it's an app for when your kids ask you, when they're like, I'm bored. It just had this roulette wheel and it had all of these things that were like pre-imported in there. And then you could also add your own and remove them so that when your kid says, I'm bored, you just show them this, they spin the wheel and then they have to do the thing, whatever the thing is.
Is it still in the App Store today?
I don't think so. I don't know. It might be. It never made any money. It was one of those things where I just had this idea and I wanted it done. And then I did not think at all about like how I would market it or whether it was actually going to make, like, I didn't think about, I just had this singular idea of like, I want to get this app out there. It's a cool app. I didn't think about the rest of it. It didn't mesh with my business plan in any way, shape, or form. Right? There were many better things I should have been doing with my time, but yeah, it might be up there. We'll see.
That's really cool. Okay, so you started working with clients one-on-one before you launched a course. And I mean, whether we're talking about the early clients or more recent clients, like, can you tell me just like some typical results that you help people to achieve? Like, what is their state before you start working with them? And then what's changed by the time you finish working with them?
Yeah. So vast majority of my clients fall into this category of successful, but got there by brute force, right? So they are doctors, they're lawyers, they're executives, they're managers. Most of them have got, family lives as well, right? So like they've just got big lives, big jobs, and they're feeling really overwhelmed. They're feeling really stressed. Sometimes, other people look at them and think, oh, they've got it all together, right? Like they're living the dream, they've got it all together. But these people on the inside feel like, one gust of wind is going to just topple the house of cards, right? That everything is just hanging on by a thread. They're often not exercising, not sleeping very much. Like it's really common for people that I work with to tell me that they're sleeping like 5 hours a night, things like that. And so they're successful at work, but it's coming at the expense of a lot of other things in their life. Their ability to spend time on their friends, family, themselves, things that they enjoy or used to enjoy. I mean, one time it was really sad. I had a client. We're trying to like get to some things that she was enjoying, and I said, "Well, what are those things that you enjoy?" And she couldn't think of anything. Like she couldn't think of anything anymore in her life that she enjoyed, and that was really sad, right? And so, what I do is I help people to figure out how to match their time to their values and their goals, right? So we say that we care about our family. We say that we want to have time for sleep. We say that we want to, build a product or do this thing or get a new job. How do we align our time with those things that we want to be doing more of so that we can do more of what we want to do and less of what we don't want to do? And a big piece of this is reducing stress along the way. Because I think that these things go hand in hand. A huge part of this is the acceptance that we are not going to do everything. I think this is really, really hard for ambitious people to accept that they are not going to be able to do every single thing that they want to do in life, right? Like we will never read all the books. We'll never watch all the movies. We will never get all the projects done. You and I and everyone else, we could work 18 hours a day for the rest of our lives. There would always be more work tomorrow. And so it's taking back control of our time and our agency around our time and learning how to prioritize in such a way that, that the things you did today were more important than the things you didn't do. And you're okay with those trade-offs. You feel good about those trade-offs because there will be trade-offs, right? You just want to be in control of it. And so, I certainly talk about like the things that people say after we have worked together and like what those results are, but I'll stop there for now.
Well, I mean, the two big things that I heard you say was you help people with the acceptance of the fact that we're not going to get to everything. And the second thing was you help them with prioritizing. So let's start with the acceptance thing. Like that makes sense. Like I have a long reading list. I have courses I want to go through. I have work projects I want to do. I have personal things I want to do, family things I want to do. How do you get people to accept that you're not going to be able to do everything?
With data. Like the first thing that we do is one of the things that we do is we actually track our time for a week to see where are things going? Like what are we spending our time on? How long are things taking? What are we really surprised by? What are we really not very happy about? Like we didn't realize we were spending so much time doing X, Y, or Z. What are the things that we feel are missing? And then we move on to like, let's catalog, let's write down what are all the things we have to do, right? And we just start to see where there's a mismatch. And we start to see that like we have to make trade-offs. There's not a way to take this list of all the things that we want to do, have to do, et cetera, and just shove it wholesale into the time that we have available. That we're going to have to make choices. And that I think that there's a lot of power that comes from that. There's a lot of power and agency. Because instead of thinking, well, somehow I'm just going to be able to magic it all together and get stuff done, and then coming up failing every single day, right? We are now learning how to move into what I call task realism, right? Which is planning for the time that we actually have available and making the right decisions about those things. So instead of getting stuck in like the endless busy work and, things that come up and fires and other people's priorities, et cetera, we're starting to be able to more consciously use our time towards the things that matter actually to us. Most people realize that they're actually spending a whole lot of time on things that don't matter to them.
You mentioned task realism. That's a concept that I learned from you recently.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask for a little bit of coaching here if you don't mind. So I love that concept. Some of the things that I've changed since learning about that concept from you is I only do meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're recording this on a Tuesday. I do my coaching calls on Tuesdays or Thursdays. I do my meetings with my team members. Any meetings are going to be on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so before I learned about that concept, I'd have these long list of things I want to do on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, but also a list of things I'd want to do on Tuesdays and Thursdays between meetings and whatnot. And I would never get them all done, right? So now what I do on Tuesdays and Thursdays is, I'm still doing just meetings, but I don't have anything else on my list to do except process inboxes.
Yes.
And so if at the end of the day, I've done my meetings and my inbox are at 0 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, that's a win. And I feel great about that.
Yes. Yes. And isn't that great? Because like, if you do happen to have a little extra time, right? Which probably was something you never had before. If you do happen to have a little extra time on a Tuesday or a Thursday, you can do one of two things. One, you could knock off early and like do something fun. Or two, you could say, you know what? I'm going to set myself up a little bit ahead. I'm going to do something that I was going to do on Friday. I'm going to do that today on Thursday and just get a little bit ahead of things, right? And that feels infinitely better than every day moving the things that you didn't do today to tomorrow, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I love that you've actually made these changes.
So I haven't gotten to the part where I'd love some advice.
Okay.
So on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, like usually I leave Fridays for just kind of more high level stuff like my weekly review, doing some financial things. So on Mondays and Wednesdays are really just like my deep work time. And so I've prioritized like content creation, bigger goals first. The problem that I'm running into now is like these like smaller tasks, like where to fit those in. Like the little things like seem to just keep getting pushed by the wayside because I'm not really planning for those things because I want to have a small list of things to do on Mondays and Wednesdays. I'm not really planning those on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So like, where do I fit in the little things?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just taking some notes so that I don't forget. Writing it down. All right. So this comes up all the time, right? Because there are lots of little things. There are endless little things. I really love that you're starting with the bigger things, because if you start with the little things, you'll never make it to the bigger things, right? Like those are just endless. But I recommend just batching them together, right? And so like I have on my calendar for later today, an hour that says sales follow-ups, right? And there's probably like 20 little mini tasks that are just like, oh, follow up with this person I had a call with a couple weeks ago, or follow up with like there are all these little things you're kind of batching them together, so they become their own time block, right? Their own kind of larger time block. Some of these things are like I think all this like life admin, right? Like we all have some, maybe it's not for work, but we all have some amount of just like life admin stuff that always seems to fall to the wayside because of other things that are more important that come up. Things like, I don't know, signing your kids' permission slips, or actually looking at your finances for the week, or, just like processing the mail, things like this. I like to have just a dedicated time once a week where I process as much of that stuff as I can. For me, I do it on the life stuff. I do it on Monday evenings, and I do it on Monday evenings because, Monday's the worst day of the week anyways, right? It's like you're moving from the weekend into the work world. And even if you love what you do, like you and I'm sure both do, it's still, we're still getting back into it. So I just do it on Mondays. I'm like, Monday's going to be a long day, and that's okay. And that leaves me a lot of space in the rest of the week to not have these little things that come up. So I would suggest just creating, like saying, how much of that stuff do I have every week, and creating a time block to work on it. And you might need to adjust it.
Do you time block your entire calendar?
I time block my work day. I also make sure to leave buffer. Like it's really important if you're time blocking. Well, there are a couple of things that are important. One, you got to be really specific in the time blocks, right? If your calendar just says like deep work, that's a recipe for disaster, because oftentimes what happens is we look at that and we say, okay, well, what was I supposed to do here, right? Or we say, but there are these emails and like these are very specific and they need my attention right now. So I think one thing, we want to be clear about it. But the second thing is we want to have buffer, because there will always be things that take longer than we intend. There will always be stuff we didn't know about yesterday that has to be done today, just that came up, right? There will always be fires to fight. Like there will always be some amount of this churn that we just didn't know about, and yet it has to get done. And so I always make sure to leave about an hour to an hour and a half of buffer that is not specifically allocated for tasks, so that I can absorb what comes up.
So hour to an hour and a half, is that like sprinkled throughout the day, or is that just like left at the end?
So I leave it at the end of the day. Some people like to kind of be like, okay, well, I think this thing is going to take me an hour, so I'll block an hour and a half for it instead. And that leaves me a little room in there if I need to take a phone call or whatever. Some people like it that way. I find that for me, it works better. And I've experimented with a lot of different ways. But for me, it works better to just kind of stop time blocking at a certain point in the day, right? Like to not have anything after that, knowing that that time will be filled, because either things will take longer than I intended, or things will have come up, or I'll get off of a sales call and they're like, yes, let's do it. And I'm like, great, now I need to create a contract for this, or whatever those things that come up, right? So I tend to do it at the end of the day, but I think that, again, this is an area where it's different for everybody. And if I can get one thing across, it's just experiment and iterate. We are not going to know what works for us until we try.
Okay. Time blocking is not something I'm necessarily doing. Let's say that on a Monday, I have three time blocks set up. I have 7 hours. I have a 7 hour day planned, and so I have 3 2-hour time blocks scheduled, because you're saying leave like an hour buffer, right? So from 8 to 10, I'm working on creating a solo podcast episode. From 10 to noon, I am making a YouTube video, and then from noon to 2, I am responding to students in the coaching program, and then I've got an hour buffer. I go about my day, I'm working from 8 to 10, it's 10 o'clock, and I'm not finished with the podcast. What do I do?
Mm-hmm. So you can do two things. One, you can say, okay, how much time do I need more? And I just keep going, right? And that means that other things are going to shift. And that's okay, because you've included buffer, right? And everyone has a different amount of buffer. So for me, it's about an hour to an hour and a half. But I think that one thing that you can do, and what I would suggest that you do, is for a week, track just how much time is it taking me to do stuff that I didn't know about yesterday that I have to do today, or things that ran over, right? Just like how much is that unexpected stuff? And then that you'll get a kind of an average. It's not going to be perfect, right? But you'll get an average. And that will be like, that's how much buffer Jacques needs, right? It might be really different from how much I need. Another thing that you can do, right? Like maybe your podcast is less of a good example because you've been doing it so long that you probably have a good idea of exactly how long it takes to get something out there, right? But let's say, you're doing something, you're not sure, you've never done this thing before or whatever. Most people have a fairly stable off ratio of time estimation. So humans, we're bad at time estimation. But most people have a pretty consistent off ratio. So for me, I'm like a 1.5xer. If I think something is going to take me an hour, it always takes me an hour and a half. And I just do the math. I just block an hour and a half. If I think it's going to take me 15 minutes, I block, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, right? I just know that. Some clients of mine, they're like 3 or 4xers, right? They are so optimistic in how long they think something is going to take, and they're so off. But knowing what their off ratio is, they can now just apply the math. They're like, oh yeah, I think this thing's going to take me half an hour. No, it's going to take you 2 hours. So block the 2 hours, right?
Hey, it's Jacques. I want to take a quick break from the conversation with Alexis to tell you about my next level coaching program. If you're already making, say, $5,000 a month or more with your online courses, but you're ready to scale that to 5 figures a month or even 6 figures monthly, next level coaching is exactly what you need. In this program, you'll get access to high level strategies, a personalized roadmap and feedback from me and my team, and a community of established course creators who are serious about growing their businesses. This is the roadmap to scaling your course to consistent higher revenue while reclaiming more of your time. Alexis, who you're hearing from in today's conversation, is an example of an active member currently inside of Next Level Coaching. If you're ready to join an elite group of course creators and get the mentorship to take your course to new heights, head over to oc.show/nextlevel to learn more and to apply. All right, back to the conversation with Alexis. When are you time blocking? Like I said, I do a review kind of once a week, and I'll figure out what I want to do the next week. And you said you don't really do a weekly review. So like, are you doing that on a daily basis? Like how often are you time blocking?
Well, I guess I do a weekly planning session, but
Okay.
I don't do a weekly. I don't look retrospectively. I only look forward. So I actually sit down on Fridays, usually like Friday morning. I spend about 30 minutes. I have my task list open. I have my calendar open, and I am moving things around on my task list so that it fits into the kind of days. And then I'm also creating time blocks during that time. And then there will be changes, of course, like every day. There's no day that I show up to is going to be exactly the same as what I had planned because things change. I mean, even this morning, it's only 10:30 for me. Already, somebody has canceled earlier this morning, and I shifted something else in there. So then what I do throughout the week is, let's say something takes me longer than I anticipated. I literally, my husband thinks this is crazy. I literally drag that time block longer to be an accurate representation of how much time it took me. And then I'll be like, okay, what needs to move to accommodate this? And I'll just like shift it around on the schedule in the moment so that I always have an accurate representation of what's happening instead of like once a week or once a day having to be like, okay, what happened? And now what do I need to do to change that? I'm kind of always doing that in the moment.
What is your recommendation for how to prioritize the things on our list?
So I prioritize in I think a different way than a lot of people do. I don't think about high, medium, low or P1, P2, P3 because I think it's really important for us to prioritize in time, right? The only metric we really have is time of when we can do things. And so it's not, I find a lot of people get into kind of analysis paralysis if they're looking at a task list and they have 15 things and they're all high priority. Well, what do you do first, right? And so I think about things in terms of, and this comes from David Allen, our friend David Allen as well, next actions. So what's the next step I need to do to move something forward? And then when am I going to do that thing? So every task app on the planet is going to have a field called due date. I don't use that to mean due date. I use it to mean next action date. So when am I actually going to do this next step that moves it forward? And of course, you're using how high, medium, low, or maybe the Eisenhower matrix, or you're using these mental frameworks to help you figure out what should be done first versus later. But I'm really using date-based prioritization. So we're saying like, what is going to fit into today that moves things forward? And I find that this helps us to not have to do a whole bunch of mental math, right? Because if your task list is sorted by due date, now you have to do a whole bunch of mental math every day to figure out, well, okay, what do I need to do working backwards to figure out how do I get to that eventual end date, right? And so many things, like this is something that comes up all the time. So many people will say, well, what do I do with the things that don't have a due date, right? Because lots of things in life don't have a real hard deadline, don't have a hard due date. Yet we still need to get them done. And so by looking at the time we have available and slotting things in, that helps us to prioritize based on, some things. If we keep pushing it, that means it's not important to us, right? Some things become obvious like that. If it's something that, is due by the end of this week or by tomorrow, then that next action date needs to be today, right? Or later this week, whatever that is. So we're using date-based prioritization typically.
I know that you value being able to take time away, go on vacations, spend time with your family. So how do you how do you handle your inboxes when you are on vacation? Do you try to manage them so that you're not just like completely bogged down when you get back?
Nope. I have never, in the 25 years I've been in the working world, I have never checked email on a vacation. Not when I worked for other people and not when I work for myself. So I put out an out of office reply that says, hey, I am not checking email. I'm on vacation. And, here's how you can get me in an emergency. Because sometimes, there will be an emergency. Certainly when I was working for other people, every once in a while, there would be an emergency and they could call me. Now I have my VA. I say, like, if you need me urgently, here you can contact my VA and she can decide whether this is urgent enough to reach out to me on vacation. And I think that's happened maybe twice, right? But what I do and what I recommend that folks do is that you actually prepare in advance for that. So I took a sabbatical, right? Just a long vacation, but I called it a sabbatical to make myself feel better, right? But I took like 6 weeks off summer before last. And I just blocked off the first 2 days when I returned to get back to inbox zero and get my task, do some planning, get my task list back in order, et cetera. And I'd blocked off 2 days. I was actually back to inbox zero on the first day after 6 weeks gone, because that's all that I was doing that day, right? That's all I was doing was just getting back to inbox zero. When I worked for other people, I would do this as well. Just block off time the first day that I'm back. Like, if you're working for other people, you're listening to this, maybe you're doing your online courses, your side business, you've still got a day job. Don't tell people you're even back, right? Pretend as if on your schedule that you are not back till the Tuesday, right? Instead of the Monday, so that you have that time so that people aren't putting meetings on your calendar, but like block it off. And then you will get back there so much faster instead of feeling like you have to dig yourself out or not be fully present in your vacation. You just have the time set aside to do that. And you get back there in a day instead of in weeks, right? Feeling like stressed because we're digging ourselves out for weeks. So that's how I do it. And I think my clients have a lot of success with that as well. Someone from my group program, most recent iteration, last cohort, she said one of her small wins that she posted in our community was that she took a vacation, did not check email, and was back to inbox zero by noon on the first day back from her vacation. And she had never experienced that before and like just felt totally on top of it. So that's what I do.
Well, I feel like a big dummy because it sounds so simple. I have a bad habit. Well, I have a good habit of properly blocking off my calendar, months in advance for when I know I'm going to be away and whatnot. But I should just block it off like 2 extra days, even though I'm going to be back. Because what I do is I'm like, oh, I'll be back on, the 14th. And I tell people that. And then people start, booking into my calendar and whatnot. And so I'm back and all of a sudden I'm doing meetings and it's just chaos. I need to have some extra buffer time there, a couple of days to just kind of reset and get back into the groove.
Yeah, exactly. You'll feel it's like, I always think about it as short-term pain versus long-term pain. Like, is it ever fun to get back to inbox zero after you've been away for a week or 6 weeks? No, not really, right? But it feels so much better to do that day one than it does to, extend that out and then come back, you're right, and be like, oh God, now I'm just back into it. I have all this stuff hanging over my head. And also I have all these meetings that people need me to be in it. And so even if I go away for like a long weekend, I will still block off like the first couple of hours of the first day that I'm back to just get back to a zero state.
When you're working with people, how much of it is a personalized approach for that individual versus teaching the same concepts over and over again to different people?
So it's a little bit of both, right? And so I think what is really important to me is that everybody feel as though there is not like a one right way. And if they don't do it this way, then they're not going to be successful, right? Because I know from experience that's just not true. There are many ways to do a thing. And so with both my coaching curriculum, when I'm working with people one-on-one, or when I'm working with people in a group, or even my online courses, we're going through the same arc. And the arc is, and I can share what that is if you'd like, but the arc of this is to help people first understand themselves better exactly as they are right now, so that then as they go through the rest of the program, as they go through the rest of the curriculum, they're able to identify like, oh, because I know this about me, this strategy that we're talking about here is likely to work better for me than this one over here, right? And that they really build in this ability and resiliency around experimentation, and not expecting that everything goes right the first time, but that you need to build in that iteration and reflection and, okay, it didn't work perfectly, but what can I do next time? Or maybe I should try this other strategy. So it's bespoke to a certain degree, but we're following the same set of concepts. How you implement those concepts may be different. So, at a very high level, we're talking about knowing yourself better exactly as you are, task management, prioritization, planning, calendar, inbox, efficiency, habit building, focus. Like these are things everybody goes through, but there are many different pathways within there. And whether I'm working with someone one-on-one, if I'm working with them one-on-one, I may be more like, okay, here's what I think I'd like you to try and XYZ. When people are going through my courses, my programs, I designed the course with my sole focus was my goal is that people are able to get massive success if they never talk to me. Like if they never talk to me. And of course I want them to talk to me, right? I like to help. But if they never talk to me, will they be able to get success? And I found that is true because we start from that knowing ourselves better perspective.
Yeah, that question was kind of a setup for a part two, and I think you kind of answered the part two as well. But when we're used to working with people one-on-one or a group basis on an individual level and offering them personalized advice based on their situation, like how do we account for that when we take those same concepts, same curriculum, and put it in an online course where there might not be as much or if any interaction with you?
Yeah. So I mean, I think I try to spell that out as much as I can. Like, hey, if you're in this situation, this might work well for you, right? If your brain works like this and this isn't working, maybe we try this thing over here, right? So I will pepper in things where I think, from my experience of working with hundreds, thousands of people at this point, I see some trends, right? And if people are in my group program, then of course they still have access to me as well. Maybe it's not one-on-one, but they have access to me to be able to ask questions, get iterations on there. But I often find that people are smart, right? Like they see what they're doing and they're like, oh, right. Like she said, I didn't have to do it exactly like this. Let me find the tweak that works for me here, right? Let me share that with other people in the community. Oh, this worked for me. Here's what I tried. And sometimes it's not the things that you would expect. So I have a woman right now in my group program. She hasn't come to any of the live sessions because it just doesn't work with her schedule, but she is like religious about watching the replays and she's really active in the community. And she had asked a question. I made a little video for her the other day and it was about breaks. And she was like, I don't know how often I should be taking breaks. I know I should be taking breaks, but like I tried 10 minutes and I don't get my stuff done if I do that. And like she tried all these things. And I said, well, what if you tried just listening to your body, right? And like, it doesn't have to be on a schedule, but when your brain feels unfocused or your body feels like you need to move, just take a short break and then come back to it. And she wrote back to me yesterday and she was like, my goal with this program was that I be able to finish 31 cases a day. Like she works in something where she has cases. I have never done it in my entire life until I implemented just like listening to my body about breaks. So fascinating, right? She's like, now I've done it. Like I literally accomplished this goal. And it wasn't necessarily about the task management or anything else. It was about listening to herself.
Interesting. What if you listen to yourself and you just want to go drink margaritas on the beach all day instead of getting your cases done?
Well, I mean, I think we all have boundaries, right? Of what she needs to support her family. She knows that she knows that she has to do her work. Like we have higher level goals, right? I think that everybody has. I mean, I love what I do. I really, really do. And also, on any given day, I'd rather be like crocheting or reading or at the pottery studio or like hanging out with my kids or binge watching TV. I mean, there's any number of things that I would love to be doing. And I think that's true for most people. But we also, if we are lucky enough, we find joy in the work we do, and we feel indebted to do that work for other people too.
So I really wanted to get a lot of time management and productivity tips out of you, and
Yeah.
I think we've succeeded there. But you've also been quite successful with courses and coaching programs and whatnot. So let's kind of shift back in that direction. You mentioned how it came up that you put your first course together when that person reached out to you on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Reached out to you on LinkedIn. I got it. I got there eventually. So tell me more about that first course, like putting it together and launching it. How did it go?
So, I mean, it was really successful right from the beginning, which was pretty interesting. I think that is not in the Udemy world, at least. I think that is not always the case for people. I have lots of instructors, partners that I know. They had like 8 courses before one ever made it big. So I guess whoever reached out to me was right that they didn't have like a good enough course around time management in their business product, right? So creating that was really interesting partnering with Udemy because they don't think they do this anymore. But at the time, they assigned me like an instructional designer to kind of help me with like she didn't write any of the content or do any of that, but even just to like explain to me how does an online course work? Like what are the ideal video lengths and like what's the breakdown of like talking about things versus doing things that we want people like there's just a lot of that they really kind of gave me a crash course in how to build a course. So I wrote it all. I found it was actually super pleasurable. Like I really enjoyed it. Um, and I think that's why I still create courses to this day and why I still like to improve upon them is because I actually find that content creation process really satisfying to be able to take like, okay, I know all of these things. There's all this stuff, but I can't throw everything in the kitchen sink in there. So what can I do to reduce this down to only the things that are going to help people move the needle? And then I find that actually helps me inform my coaching as well. Because once I've boiled that down in one place, I'm like, oh, right. Like when I'm coaching people, when I'm working with people, there's so much knowledge I may have around things, but maybe they only need this part right now. Right. And so, yeah, I mean, I created that course. I tried to promote it the best of my ability. I think that's where I am, maybe not the best is the marketing skills and that stuff is just stuff I've had to learn over time and that I'm probably still not the greatest at. But it got a lot of great reviews. And I think in the Udemy world, when something starts getting reviews and starts getting traction, other people see it, it goes to the top of the algorithm, more people see it. And so today, that one course, I think 175,000 people have taken it. And of course, I have other courses too, but a lot of people have taken that course.
Wow. That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. Yeah.
It's a lot of people. So how many courses have you made at this point?
I have 5 smaller courses on Udemy, and then I have my flagship, like my coaching program turned into a course called Time Well Spent. And so that one I do not sell on Udemy. It doesn't make sense to do that there. But that is kind of the biggest course, the most robust, and that's kind of the underpinning of my coaching programs as well. And then I have 5 courses on Udemy.
Was there a point in time where you're like, I got to get off Udemy and start selling stuff on my own website?
Yeah, I mean, I think of these things. So I've always had kind of multiple streams going on, and because I didn't start out as a course creator, Udemy was like a lucky thing that happened to me in many ways, right? And so I've always thought, Udemy is a high volume, low ticket product, right? Um, and it has been really good to me, right? And it's a great I think it would have been really hard for me to reach that many people through my own, the global reach that they have. The fact that it is at an accessible price to people around the world. Like there is a place for that. And also I realized like I love creating courses. I love doing this work. And there's a way for me to do this on my own but I can't limit the chart. I can't, like, I think Udemy caps you at like $200 a course, right? And that was not going to make a business model that worked for me. And so I realized that, one, I really loved the course thing, but I would need to have a different model. Like, Udemy is great. It's on the side. I still have it over there, and maybe I'll never leave it. But I also knew that there was something that I wanted to do that was bigger and more robust and had more value in it. And that wasn't something that I could do there.
So if somebody's listening to this and like, wow, Alexis's tips are amazing, this is an area I need help with, like, where's the best place for them to go? Should they go to Udemy? Should they go to your website? And you got multiple offerings. Like, where should they go?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best place is to go to my website, alexishaselberger.com. My program, Time Well Spent, is there. I think this is, one-on-one coaching, always available. I have limited spots, right? So you might not be able to start right away. My Time Well Spent program is, I think, the best of all worlds because you're getting the full shebang, but you're getting an online course. You have unlimited access to that online course, but you're also getting support along the way. You're getting community along the way, which I'm sure, from the things that you do is really important for people's progress. And so some people are great with an online course, and I try to keep my online courses, especially now, like my Udemy online courses, I keep those to very specific topics, right? Like I have a 30-minute inbox zero course on Udemy that is like short, sweet, to the point. Here's what, here's how to get there. Here's how to stay there. Here's how to get back to it after vacation, right? Whereas I think of Time Well Spent as like, you're getting it all, right? You are going to be able to move from completely overwhelmed, feeling totally stressed, not getting as much done as you want, to feeling like I am in control of my life, of my time. I have enough time for myself. I have enough time for other people. I'm getting done the things that I need to get done. I'm progressing at work, and I'm still having time for me. So I think Time Well Spent is the best place.
You mentioned a little while ago that marketing sales hasn't always been your strength with the whole thing. That's one of the advantages of being on Udemy is they handle a lot of the marketing for you. The program that you spoke most highly of, your Time Well Spent coaching program, I imagine that Udemy is not marketing that much for you. How are you driving traffic these days?
Well, in some part, I am working with you, right? And I'm working with you to turn that program into an evergreen program and build that marketing engine out for that. But in the past, I've still been quite successful with that, even before I wanted to take it to the next level, going through your program. And so I think what I've done a pretty good job at retrospectively is content marketing and SEO. I think that, like, if you search productivity coach, I will be on the first page probably, and at least the last time I checked. And I have since the very beginning, I've been, putting out a blog every week, sending that out to my email list. I have done a lot, lead magnets and things like that. I started a podcast earlier this year. I also have done a lot of podcast interviews, right? That was something from the very beginning. I've been on dozens and dozens of podcasts, and I think that's another opportunity to just share with somebody else's audience that isn't your audience, right? That you might not have access to otherwise. I get quoted a lot in a lot of publications. And so that's another way. Those are all backlinks to my site. And so I think just by kind of being out there, being a voice, and speaking at conferences, doing things like that, I think that I've developed some sort of thought leadership around this stuff. And that's where most people at this point are coming to me through my the intake form on my website or through referrals.
You mentioned content marketing first, weekly blog. You also mentioned a newer podcast. First of all, what's the podcast name? Because this audience is podcast listeners. They might be interested in jumping over there. What's the name of the podcast? Yeah,
it's called Do More, Stress Less with Alexis Haselberger. And so, it's exactly what I teach people. Do more, stress less.
I mean, that's a great name. I wanted to bring this up earlier, but on your website, alexishaselberger.com, the headline is "Want to do more and stress less." I mean, that sounds like a awesome outcome that people are absolutely looking for. It's a great headline and a great name for a podcast.
Thank you. Yeah.
As far as content marketing goes, you've been consistent with the blogs. You started a podcast. You've been consistent with that. What is your system for coming up with ideas for your content marketing?
Yeah. So I have a task in my task system called weekly blog, and that is linked to a spreadsheet called blog backlog. And I come up with ideas at a rate that is far greater than I can ever write about them. So I think if I look at the spreadsheet right now, I think there are probably 300 blog post ideas that I haven't yet acted upon. And, I've been posting something once a week for 7+ years now, right? Or 7 years. And so I read a lot. Like I'm a person who I probably read, like 75 books a year or so. I think about, like, intake a lot. I think about a lot of things. And so I often am just coming up with ideas while I'm driving, like your driving thoughts app, or I come up with most ideas while I'm running. This is just a time that is really, like, for my brain, it's really prolific time. Like I'll be listening to a podcast while I'm running, and I'll like stop, speak into my phone to, keep track of whatever that idea, because I know that if I wait till the end of the run, I will have forgotten it. And I just come up with a lot of ideas that way. And then once a quarter or so, when I'm doing quarterly planning, I will look at the spreadsheet and I'll just put some dates around things so that I know kind of what the schedule of content will look like. And then what I like to do is batch process my writing on airplanes. And so anytime I go on a flight, I just turn everything on offline access through Google Docs. And I just open up my laptop, I look at the list, and I just write shitty first drafts until I can write no more. Like until I am out of the flow state, I just like rough draft it. I don't do any editing. And then usually once a month or so, I'll batch process, I'll edit, I'll publish, I'll, make the content that will become all the social media content that comes out of that. I'll make a podcast episode that comes out of that, et cetera. So I try to batch it in that way.
You haven't mentioned any sort of video-based content marketing. Do you find that that's okay? That, I mean, obviously you can run a successful business without doing video-based content marketing.
Oh, I mean, I do have a YouTube channel. I guess I do some video-based content marketing, but what I do is I really repurpose a concept, right? So what I will do, like if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of my process, is I have a concept that I know I'm going to write about. I've written a rough draft about it. Then I edit that, get it onto Squarespace. I create then a like 5 to 10 minute YouTube video based on that same content. I create like a 90-second video that I can use on TikTok or Instagram, Reels, Facebook, etc. But it's all from this one content idea. So there's like one content idea per week that's getting repurposed in many different ways in many different channels. So that same concept will become, a carousel post on Instagram, but it will also be this 90-second video. But there is also YouTube for this as well.
You said you read 75 books a year. That's a lot of books. Is that all nonfiction?
No, I read a lot. I read a good mix of fiction and nonfiction. I'm in 3 book clubs. And I will say, like, I am a heavy audiobook user, right? Like I'm not reading all of those in a paper format. And I'm a person that like listens to things on 1.7x speed. So, I just find I run, I do errands. Like if I'm driving, like there's always a time for me to be listening to something. And so, yeah, I've always been a voracious reader, even when I was a little kid. Like I was the kid who was always reading 6 books at a time and had like a big stack of books next to my bedside table. And I'm still like that. I read a lot.
Yeah, I remember when you joined the coaching program, you were like, "Oh, it's so weird to hear you talk at normal speed because you always listen to me at like double speed on the podcast."
100%. I'm used to it now. But yeah, I'm often listening to things. And it's funny, my husband used to listen to things really fast. And I was like, how can you even intake that? Like, what is this? What are you doing? And then I just found that like, I just kept ratcheting it up a little. I'd be like, wow, people are talking really slow. And then I'd like ratchet a little bit more. People are still talking slow a little bit more. And now if I like download a new podcast and it's set to 1.x, right? Just in my podcast player, I listen, I'm like, oh my God, they all sound drunk. Like everyone sounds drunk at 1x,
Is there a key book in your space in the task management prioritization space that you'd recommend to people?
So I think that David Allen, like getting things done is kind of the gold standard, right? And again, you don't have to take like there's many golden nuggets in there, right? You don't have to do it all, but there's a lot of golden nuggets in there. I think you mentioned a few of the key ones. I also really like Oliver Burkeman's book, 4,000 Weeks. This is newer. It came out in the past couple of years. And when I read that book, I felt like, oh, I could have written this book, right? It's very much about the idea that like, look, we've got 4,000 weeks about in our life, and you're not going to do everything in 4,000 weeks. And so how do we really think about this from a philosophical perspective? And so I tend to like books like that. It's funny. I don't read as like, of course I read a lot of like productivity stuff, but mainly just to make sure that I'm current. Those are not but like, I feel like I actually, a lot of the things that I end up writing about or concepts are not from books around productivity. They're from other things I'm reading or making connections to, that I'm then thinking, oh yeah, that relates to this topic that I was thinking about. Or maybe, I don't know, somebody will say something 3 times in 1 week, clients will say something similar. And I'll be like, oh, that's something that connects the dots about this other thing I was reading.
Last big question for you here, Alexis. So you started out by doing some one-on-one coaching, content marketing. You moved into courses through Udemy, moved over to your own website, coaching programs, still doing some one-on-one coaching. If you started over today, how would you start?
I think that's actually a really hard question because I think that so much of everything we do is trial and error, right? And like we just have to kind of figure it out. I think that the one thing that I would do really differently is I would have started an email list immediately. I think it took me like a year to realize, one, I'd never heard of a lead magnet, right? Like I had no idea what that was. I think someone made an offhand comment about an email list, and I was like, email list, what's that? I really knew nothing. And so I think if I could go back in time, the thing I would have done differently was build my email list faster.
Okay.
But I don't think that I would have done, because everything came after something else, right? It's like I started coaching, and then I had a huge wait, like during the pandemic, I had a like 6-month wait list for individual coaching. And I was like, oh, I have to do something about this. People need help. So I created a group program. And through that, I created a course that kind of underpins that. And, at some point, one of my one-on-one coaching clients was like, hey, it would be really great if you had like slides that we could go over. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Let's do that. And then somebody else was like, maybe you could create some videos so I could watch it when you're not there. And I was like, great idea. I'll do that. And so I think that a lot of things, it's like, I needed to figure things out in an organic way. But I think that the one thing that I would have done differently is like know what an email list was and try to start it sooner, because I think that would have gotten me closer to being able to, sell my course and my programs through my own stuff faster and at a larger scale.
That I totally understand and respect that answer. Let me ask it a slightly different way and see if your answer changes at all. Let's say you were like, I'm done with this, prioritization and task management stuff. I want to go off into a completely new niche. You mentioned some of the hobbies you like to do. Let's say you're starting a brand new brand around like crocheting or gardening or traveling or something like that, right?
Sorry.
How would you get started in a brand new niche today?
How would I get started in a brand new niche? Okay. I think I would still probably start with content marketing, because I think that you start to see how, and I wouldn't have called it content marketing then, right? But I think that if you just start putting content out, you start seeing what resonates with people, right? And that will push you. You're like, oh, I cared about this thing I was talking about, but nobody else did. So maybe that's not a direction that I need to go. But I think that I would still just start putting stuff out there. And I think that where a lot of people get stuck is they get stuck in perfection, right? Like it's like, it has to be perfect before we get it out there. I need to build all of this and then find the people instead of just kind of doing it along the way. And I think if I were to get started in anything else, I just start by doing, right? I think you learn the most by just putting it out there, and you do kind of fail a lot. Like you learn things that don't work. But that's really important to know as well. So I guess, sorry if I misunderstood the question earlier, but does that answer your question better?
No, I don't think you misunderstood any parts of it. I wanted to kind of go a little deeper and really understand, because you've had a lot of valuable experience and have a lot of success. And obviously it's a culmination of the things you've done over the past 7, 8, however many years. But if you truly were starting over with something, like, because that's a lot of people that are listening to this haven't necessarily started. It's like, where do I go? Do I do ads? Do I do content marketing? Do I make the course first? Right? Like, what are those initial steps? And I just like to understand from people that have been there, done that. Like, if they had to start over, what would they do?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like, I wouldn't make a course first. I would work with human beings first in whatever niche it was. And I think that the reason for that is because you don't know what you don't know, right? Like, whatever you're like an expert in, right? You're so many levels ahead of whoever it is that you're teaching that you like miss some steps sometimes, right? And you're trying to talk to people, you're like giving them the 301 when they need the 101, right? And so I think that it's really, that's why I will probably never stop taking one-on-one clients, even as my business has shifted more towards group and more towards courses. I will probably always have some one-on-one clients because I think it's really important to understand what's going on with human beings and see like what resonates, what they don't understand, what's new that's coming up that you're not aware of because you don't work in the corporate world anymore. I think that stuff is really important. And if you just create a course in a vacuum, you're going to miss stuff.
The Do More, Stress Less podcast, alexishaselberger.com. Go check out her stuff. Alexis, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for being on. It was fun.
And that's a wrap on the conversation with the one and only Alexis Haselberger. So I personally have really benefited from learning from Alexis. Her approach is very realistic and it truly helps. I gave some examples in the conversation of things that I've implemented, and I hope that you will do the same. It's essential to build systems that align with our own values and lifestyle and not just chase productivity for productivity's sake. Thank you so much for listening. If you are ready to take your course business to the next level, remember to check out my next level coaching program at oc.show/next level. And for the links to everything we discussed today, head over to the show notes at oc.show/254. And don't forget to take action on what you've heard here today. This is an especially important one. Don't just listen. Take action on what you've heard today. I'm rooting for you.